It is the 21st century. There are too many video games. But out there, it's waiting. The best video game you've never played.
Hello and welcome to the best video game you've never played, the podcast where I, stand-up and improv comedian Lewis Dunn, invite a guest on to bring on a video game that I have never played. I then play it for some time, get them on the podcast, and we have a chat about whether or not it is the best video game you have never played. This week's guest is Glenn Moore. He is a stand-up comedian. You might know him from shows such as Mock the Week. You might know him from the Absolute Radio Breakfast Show. And you might know him because he has been streaming video games over the past couple years. In 2020, he tried to stream over 100 video games and succeeded. And now, 2021, he's trying to stream 101 video games and is currently on his way to successfully doing that. I found out about his streaming project while browsing Twitter, and I thought, surely somebody who is approaching 201 games completed over 2 years, has a video game that I would love to play that I've never heard of. And you know what? He absolutely delivered something that I had not considered before. And when he brought it onto the podcast, I was like, this is going to be really interesting to see whether or not I like this game. Because boy, oh boy, did I not think that this game was going to be my sort of a thing. Is it my sort of a thing? The only way to find out is to keep listening. So let's join the podcast now as we sit down with Glenn Moore. Hello, Glenn. How are you?
I'm very well, Lewis. Thank you very, very much for having me.
Not at all, not at all. Are you keeping nice and warm where you are? Are things okay there?
Yeah, everything's fine. It's chilly, but it's okay. I've got my room is the room where I stream and play video games. Is darker than it normally is because I had blinds installed. Now, I've lived here for nearly 2 years, and this has been a place where, when guests have stayed overnight, they have been woken up by the blinding sunshine at 6 a.m, and we've finally rectified it nearly 2 years in. So that's why I'm like essentially in darkness, illuminated only by a lamp.
Yes, well, that's ideal for streaming as well, I understand. You don't want...
It feels really cozy. I've got to say, I feel cozy right now. I feel really cozy.
That's good stuff. I mean, you've been doing a lot of streaming lately, haven't you? You've been trying to do, is it 101 games?
It is 101 games. I'm in the early 70s at the moment, so we're down to the final... We're in the 20s of what's left. And it's looking doable, but I found it very easy to do it last year when I did 100 games, and that came about accidentally because lockdown happened. I was just on the sofa every day playing loads and loads of video games, having the summer holidays that I never had as a child, and just playing game after game after game. And it got to about September, October, and I suddenly realised, hang on, I think I've played about 80 games. And I worked it out, and I counted them all up. And then when I started streaming in November last year, I thought, you know what, let's try and do 100. That's a nice round figure to try and do. And then this year I thought, let's up the ante, let's try and do 101. And then the scientists had to find a cure, didn't they? Sending us back out of lockdown and me back into, the world of stand-up comedy and writing and performing and television and radio that has ultimately been a huge detriment to juggle alongside trying to finish 101 games. It has been a wretched experience this year, and not one I'm in any hurry to repeat. But I have also discovered games I would otherwise have never played. And some of those have been dreadful, but some have been amongst my favourites I've ever played. I've found some real diamonds in the rough.
Well, I think that's fascinating, because this is one of the reasons I started this podcast as well, was I basically sort of realised, I don't know about you, when we got told to stay indoors and we basically suddenly playing video games was in favour of the national effort.
Yeah.
And suddenly we were a hero for staying indoors and just playing old games. A part of me was just a bit like, I feel like I play too many of the same games. I feel like I play the same genres way too often, and I find myself just picking up familiar things. I'm like, no, I want to push outside of my safety zones and push outside of what I normally play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think indie games... I mean, I can't remember last time I played a generic indie game. There have been some really, truly bizarre things I'd never played. I mean, but also there were games I'd say heard of and people I knew loved, but I just didn't like the sound of. Like, for instance, I was really reluctant to play, say, Untitled Goose Game because I hate video game humor. I think it's never done at a professional standard, and it's really poor stuff. And I thought Untitled Goose Game, based on just the general tone of it, I thought it was going to be a bit epic bacon and a bit, this is for Elon Musk fans. It just wasn't. I thought it was going to be infuriating. And I played it, and it was actually a really sweet game. And I was really surprised about it. I would never have normally played something like that. Similarly, I went into last year hating the idea of Dark Souls games. I just hated the idea of them. I always just thought they looked ugly and grey and brown. And the concept was, they're hard and you die loads. And it was like, I don't understand. It doesn't even look good. Why would I want that? And I really forced myself to just try Dark Souls on the Switch, give that a go.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with the genre, and now that is probably the one that's probably the genre I now play too much of, and I need to sort of expand. I need to expand my horizons outside of that. But yeah, I think once I ran out of like really mainstream games to play, I started to look at sort of indie titles and stuff like that. There's so many things out there which don't even wouldn't even register with the average person as a game. I still think so many people out there either think video games are Pac-Man or Fortnite, and those are the only two things that there are. Whereas, a great game I played last year was called Observation. Have you ever played that or heard of it?
I've done Observation on this podcast. I
really?
recommended
you have?
Yes.
I went through the list of previous games because I was like, when you were like, what game do you reckon you would like to do? Observation was one that came into my head as one where I thought, I don't really know anyone else who's played it, and it is it's purely an admin game. You play as an admin computer just doing work. It's a job. It was a chore, but I loved it, and it was creepy.
I recommended it to... So sometimes on the podcast I get people on and I recommend a game to them. And I recommended Observation to previous guest Mungo. Right. On the basis... I thought I'd never felt more immersed in a video game. Like the way that it used like the filters and like It was graphically impressive, but that wasn't why I was immersed. I was immersed because I recognised the interfaces and I recognised like the VHS like signal interference.
Exactly. It's like that sort of alien... Ridley Scott sort of used future dynamic that I really sort of enjoyed, where it was clunky, and even though you were playing this high-tech machine, it still had like awkward loading screens and stuff like that. It just felt very Soviet. That was excellent. That was truly excellent. And again, I would never ever. And I played that probably in like the first week or two of lockdown. That I hope sort of set a precedent of things to come.
I mean, it's a hell of a game to play in lockdown because that is a game about isolation and being terrified of leaving somewhere as well. So it does sort of match up.
But at the same time, when you've got nothing to do and a game is literally giving you task after task after task, and the content of the game is you have a job, it actually really gives you a sense of purpose. Because I was quite fortunate in that the radio show I do in the mornings, that still carried on in lockdown. Gigs to some extent carried on in lockdown, but in a Zoom capacity. And TV shows still sort of happened, but they sort of happened in a sort of social distance way. Everyone had to be sort of very, very safe. My girlfriend works as a comedy writer, and most of the TV shows that she was writing on at the time were being postponed, were being outright cancelled, stuff like Have I Got News For You and Mock the Week. And she found, during that first few weeks of lockdown, that so many people found difficult, herself included, that she we bought Stardew Valley, and she found that just having those tasks and having responsibilities every day was just something that really sort of gives you purpose sort of every day. And she would just spend hours on it in the evenings as sort of like this. It's something to do, and there's, even though it's a graphical virtual achievement, it still does feel like something. If the human body isn't conditioned to being put to work for decades at a time, and then suddenly just having nothing for no reason. And it really helped just sort of ease sort of people into lockdown. I think games like that are perfect for it. I'm playing Stardew at the moment, and I love it.
I feel like you've also explained why Animal Crossing was an enormous hit, because again, it has that daily obligation of turning up and doing things.
Yeah, exactly. I hit Animal Crossing at exactly the wrong time. I got Animal Crossing for Christmas, Christmas just gone.
Yeah.
So just as what life was starting to sort of open up again, and I think Animal Crossing was not so much a Stardew, collecting these things, collecting that things. It was more of a sociable event of me and my friends are meeting up in this town and we're doing something.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And so I joined Animal Crossing just as everyone was leaving, and that felt...
Oh, no!
Actually, so my very brief experience of Animal Crossing was actually really depressing.
Yeah, you're turning
because
up
there was
late
just
to the party.
nothing... There was nothing to do.
Oh, my God.
It was just me and Tom Nook. It was...
just you and a Tanuki you owe money, just staring at you. Well, look, so this is the thing. When we're talking about jobs and we're talking about obligations and things, you have brought along a game. Also, another fantastic example of exactly the kind of game I would never have picked for myself. I very
Same.
much feel
I would not have picked this. I would not have picked this, and it was one of the first games I played this year, and I think it was free briefly for PlayStation users, and so I thought, oh, let's give this a go. And
so,
oh my god,
why don't you introduce us to the game that you have brought along that you think is the best video game that I've never played?
I'm going to recommend Frostpunk. Now, in terms of genres of stuff we'd never even played, I would never normally have played a city building sim. I wasn't really that au fait with sort of isometric, city simulations in the first place. I sort of played similar sort of things like Command and Conquer in the 90s and Age of Empires 2 in the sort of early 2000s. But I sort of veered away from those sort of things because I've always liked video games that have a storyline, a structure, and campaigns that have like a specific endpoint and end credits, so I know when to stop. Because I knew as a teenager I got too into things like Pro Evo, and there was just no logical end point. And so you just sort of think, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to perpetually do this for the rest of my life. But at the same time, I didn't really like it when Age of Empires 2 did have a campaign, because I was like, no, you want the freedom to just expand your empire and see where it goes. And I start to get. Sorry.
There's a kicking over of the sandcastle sometimes you get in strategy games like this where you're like, but I built everything. I built it all. And then they go, no, new level. And you go, oh, all my work.
Exactly. And so that was never really sort of up my street. And then I really got into Crusader Kings 2 and 3 last year, which is as in-depth as a management sim can sort of really get. And I love those. And so when I first heard about Frostpunk, I was like, I'm not sure this really appeals. It sounded bleak, the concept being that it is this sort of parallel sort of universe, I guess, but in this sort of Victorian society, the temperatures plunge to about, 100 minus 150 degrees Celsius? It's insanely cold. And you basically play as a group of Victorian townspeople, a mixture of just regular humans and some trained engineers, who decide to push north as they think that will be where the cooler sort of elements are. Africa is just completely frozen over. And they find in basically the middle of the highlands this enormous sort of chimney, this huge cylindrical generator that needs to be fueled with coal, and they sort of get it up and running again, and that sort of gets a temperature to, a really sort of decent degree. But the game basically just puts you in that situation and sort of goes, right, you've got a bunch of coal and steel and wood to gather. You're basically living in a large crater with a generator in the middle. Start building your city. And it is a campaign. It does have an end point, but you just deal with these villagers and you sort of build up this town. Because the generator is circular and in the middle, you build the city in a circle around it. So it just visually looks pretty to sort of build that. But you build a combination of sort of tents to just house people as an emergency measure, and then you try to upgrade those to huts and then to houses. You've got medical bays to sort of make sure that people who are sort of too cold can be sort of treated. You've got engineering buildings, which allow your engineers to work and research more stuff, like basically huge sawmills that collect the wood so that your villagers don't have to in the freezing cold, and things called like a coal thumper, which does the same for coal, and then a steelworks. But every couple of days or so, the temperature just continually drops. Sometimes it rises again, but it just continually drops, and you go, right, it's too cold for people to work, so we've got to hope our stockpiles are enough. Because, you send hunters out every night to sort of gather food. We've got to make sure we've got enough stockpiles for the next few days, because no one can leave their houses for the next few days because it's just simply too cold.
Yeah.
So that element, I was like, that wouldn't have appealed to me a couple of years ago. But I really got into it, and I loved it because it's so atmospheric. The music is incredible. It's like a Hans Zimmer soundtrack. Visually, it just looks great. It's just a really neat setting for where you sort of have your city. And I quite like the idea of a city building sim where you are never, ever on top of it. It's a bit like, it's a difference between, say, The Last of Us and Uncharted, is that if Age of Empires is your Uncharted game where you can just keep getting huge amounts of gold and iron and steel, this is Last of Us where you're just scrimping for just whatever you can. But it expands outside of that. It's not just this city sim where outside of that you can create a sort of travelling post where people in a very Phineas Fogg sort of way build a hot air balloon, and you travel to sort of different locations across a map. You just send those people out for days at a time, and then it kind of turns into a bit of a D&D sort of element where it's sort of you sort of go, oh, your villagers have arrived at such and such a location, and suddenly it turns into this sort of written screen where it's just text based. And it says, look, you found this ship that is on a cliff face. Do you want to basically do like the end of the Italian Job? Do you want to try and risk grabbing all the materials that's in there, but it looks like it's going to teeter over the edge? And so you can take the risk or just leave. And if you take the risk, it basically is a coin toss of whether or not your village is going to die or not. And I found that really sort of exciting. And you can also set up hunting outposts if they go, oh my god, we found a coal mine. And look, it's going to take 3 days a time to send people out there to get coal. But when they come back every 3 days, we've just got a huge amount of coal. And those sort of elements sort of make you go, oh, good. You know, we've finally hit a bit of success.
Yeah.
Our luck is changing. But then you've also got these randomly generated events, again, where it's sort of text-based, that come up, and you might have villagers want a bit of a mutiny on their hands. People might be dissatisfied with this. People might want you to break up this new religious group that has sorted. You've got this sort of morality and happiness bar that basically drains or increases based on how you're doing. There is so much to do, but I basically played the game on pause 99% of the time.
Oh,
I played
really?
it so slowly. I had it on the slowest setting. I would pause it every single day and or every single hour and just sort of go, right, what's happening here? What's happening here? Making sure everything was just perfectly sort of intertwined, because when you're trying that hard to keep everyone alive, it is heartbreaking when one person dies. Because you really feel that.
I'm fascinated because I feel like we've zoomed through so much of what this game is. Like, you're right. It's this.
Sorry,
it's
I've leapt into a spiel.
It's this,
just because I know you're about to criticise it. So
well,
no.
I
need to get my whole spiel across.
I feel like something I want to start with, and this is just, to me, this is an important thing, because even before I came on the call, I mistakenly called this game Steampunk. It's not called Steampunk. It's called Frostpunk. Can I just start with, I have no idea why it's called Frostpunk. I get Frost. I totally understand Frost, because this is a game about surviving in the cold, and basically the whole game. The game has a series of, like, resource currencies. So you've got coal, you've got food, you've got wood, you've got steel. And basically over time you learn in the game that the ones that matter are food and coal. And the only reason that you have wood and steel is to get more food and coal.
Yeah.
So Frost completely sits with it. 100% understand that. I don't know why it's called Frostpunk.
I think that's fairly obvious. It is because it's a steampunk game.
I mean,
that's
kind
where
of,
the punk element comes from. It 100% is. If you just look at how everyone's dressed and everything about, yes, it's a Victorian society, but look at the automatons.
But like the steampunk, the punk element of steampunk is...
They've taken the wrong bit.
They've taken the wrong bit.
Yeah, exactly. The punk element is, and I hate the use of the word punk in that context. I hate the name cyberpunk, for instance.
Yeah.
I really firmly wish, and I'll defend this game to the death, but I do wish it was called anything else, because this is the thing. I went into Frostpunk going, oh no, am I going to like this? Is this going to be a bit the title put me off.
quirky?
The title put me off.
Also, I went into Frostpunk, so this is something that I think is massively in the game's favour, at least certainly in my personal tastebook. I thought Frostpunk was going to be sprawling. I thought it was going to be a Crusader Kings type game. I thought it was going to have so many systems. Like, sort of initially looking at it, I'm basically looking at it going, oh, it's a depressing version of Civ. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I quite like Civ. But Civ is like... Civilization as a game, basically the way my brain works is, you can't follow everything, so pick the thing you care about and hope it works out.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at Frostpunk going, this is a game that's going to punish me for not paying attention. This is a game that's absolutely going to be like, no, you failed, try again.
You've got to do every single thing in Frostpunk. There's nothing you can ignore. You have to keep every single person happy. You've got to make sure every need is sort of catered for. I never went to the level of detail of clicking on this particular villager and then it shows you like happy, cold, and hungry. Never did that. Like, I don't believe there is any management sim out there that does ever require you to do that. I think it's just a nice little detail.
Roswell Roller Coaster Tycoon, when you can click on individual guests and just find out if they want a burger or something, and you're like, okay, I'll build a burger.
Exactly. And you go, well, what? I mean, what do you want me to pick you up and put you in a burger place? That's it. That's literally it. Yeah.
But Frostpunk, the thing I really liked about it is that it is not sprawling. You are in this little crater where they're protected from the elements.
With what, 100 people?
I think it's like 80. You start with 80 people.
Yeah.
And it's like your options are, at the start, fairly limited. But more to the point, this game is just about building, maintaining the city, and telling people where to work and how you're going to allocate resources. And I love that, because you've mentioned earlier stuff like Age of Empire. Another game I played for this podcast was Stronghold. And I find with both of these games, I really like building a settlement, collecting resources, upgrading things to make them collect the resources better, and managing that side of things. And the thing that I always hate in these games is when you have to then take a bunch of soldiers into war, because I have no idea how to do military strategy in the slightest. I'm just like, I don't know, all the sword people attack the catapult. I don't understand how to do war.
Honestly, Age of Empires 2 used to advertise itself like this, and it really annoyed me. It was sort of like, how are you going to dominate the world through military might, economically, or will you be diplomatic? And it's like those last two, you can't really
You can't do it
like that. Somewhat, if the richer you get, the more likely you are to be attacked. So that's just how it is. Whereas, and in Frostpunk, there's no combat. There's no combat at all. I love that element. Sure, there's certainly a lot of internal conflict, but it's not like, say, something like Crusader Kings where you're marrying people off, or you've got this argument with this person. It's more a case of, look, these peasants are revolting. What are you going to do? You've got 10 days to keep everyone happy, or a bunch of them are going to leave.
Yeah.
And again, when we talk about Frostpunk, I'm mainly talking about that first campaign mission, because there's 4 main campaign missions. The other 3 are, fun little spins on it, but they basically feel like DLC. That first campaign is essentially the whole game. It's like a 5-hour campaign. That is the game. That's fully what the game is meant to be. I enjoyed playing the other campaigns, but I was like, no, it's that first one that was unbelievably cinematic.
Yes,
just incredibly well paced.
And I think as well, the thing that sort of, when I realised this about Frostpunk, that it wasn't going to be this sprawling game, it was this game in this crater, it started to remind me of other games. So this is a weird comparison.
Yeah.
But if you've ever played like tower defense games like Plants vs. Zombies, or if you've ever been like on online, what's the thing, on online flash games where you set up like tower defense things, because you begin to realize the game is not necessarily about like building the biggest army as quickly as possible and charging off like in a StarCraft or Command and Conquer, where it's like it's so heavily Twitch based and so heavily based on your ability to know exactly how to do things correctly. It becomes more like, okay, there is an optimal strategy to this game. There is actually a way to play Frostpunk that will consistently work if you can figure out what to do. And so my mindset just clicked. It's no longer a game in which I feel like I am at the mercy of an AI. I am at the mercy of events, and my job now is to be optimal rather than like quick and ruthless.
Yeah. That fully makes sense, and it does suit it. I never felt like I was having to do... I mean, sure, you have to make decisions on the fly, but I never really felt like, the game is, the game is hitting you for doing this particular thing. Like in Age of Empires, where you sort of go, right, I've veered too much into this person's territory. As a result, the Persians are going to attack.
Yes,
it was nothing like that. It was like, okay, I know these events are going to happen. I'm just going to make sure I'm prepared in sort of each way. And there was basically, management games... There's a fine line they tread, and the moment you reach the absolute epitome of happiness with those games, the epitome of satisfaction, they usually immediately veer into boring. And that's not the game's fault at all, but I just prayed for this moment in Frostpunk, and I got it, and I loved it, which was the moment where the city is now running by itself. I now have an absurd amount of supplies. The amount of profit I'm making is just, I could shut down production of everything for a month and not feel
any of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it was the automatons that did that, because once my Phineas Fogg balloon artists started to make their way into various caves, they found those steam cores.
Yeah.
And they managed to bring back a steam core every single day, or every couple of days, which meant you could build a new automaton every couple of days, which meant by the time it got to the end of the campaign, every hospital, every engineering structure, everything was run by an automaton, and they run 24 hours a day. My villagers were all indoors doing nothing. I didn't have any doctors working or anything like that.
That's fascinating to me, because I was going to ask you as well, did you manage to beat this game on your first time through it? Did you manage to?
I did.
See, that to me is incredible. It took me 4 goes. And what I really like, you've said as well, the main campaign of this game is about 5 hours long, 4 or 5 hours long. And I love it for that. Because what I would do is I would sit down at my computer at about 6 and go, right, here we go. We're going to have another crack at this. And because I've played it before, I know what events are coming. I know what to prepare for. And I also now know what is a waste of my time.
Yes, yeah.
And it was really interesting. So, for example, the automatons. I did find an automaton in the game, because it's sort of part of the main story. If you follow what the game tells you to do, is you will find an automaton. What I found was I did not use the automaton.
Did you dismantle it?
No. I would put him on. I think I put him on gathering coal, because I realised that coal burns 24 hours a day, and I need to gather coal 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
But he only works at 60% efficiency. So my brain just went, well, anything I put him on is worse than me putting people on it. So
Didn't you want to do the engineering upgrades where after a while, they become more useful than a person.
I could not get the resources together to do
Great,
that.
okay.
Because I'm not sure. I mean, maybe you're just... this is the thing. I feel like this is a game where if you really click with it, you can solve Frostpunk. It's almost like a Rubik's Cube in that sense. It's not just that Frostpunk is a game that you engage with based on the things it's telling you. There is... definitely a way you could sit down and solve the game to be the most efficient outcome and get the most things out. And I feel like that's actually why I like it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because I'm so used to playing strategy games where I do not understand where I lost. On Stronghold in particular, there would always come a point in almost any level where I would be at a huge peak of I had loads of resources, I had loads of military, here we go, we're about to win, all my military's gone, and for some reason everyone's starving. What has happened? I don't understand where everything went. Whereas Frostpunk, okay, it took me 4 goes to beat it, because this is just not my genre of game. Strategy games just obliterate me in terms of my ability to think. And I will admit, Frostpunk does have a big problem, which I found in the first one, which is for ages, there were just things that weren't happening that I did not understand. So you mentioned there's coal thumpers that will basically pull coal out of the ground.
Yeah.
What the game doesn't tell you is, sure, it'll pull it out of the ground, but you still need to collect it.
Yeah, that's shit. That is some bullshit.
And
that's really annoying. And also I found, you then also need to put gathering posts around it. So that then the efficiency is sort of increased. I didn't know. I stumbled across that by accident because the moment I built I never wait, there's 2 things. There's a coal thumper and coal mine. I never used the coal mines because I knew that coal mines eventually run out. I knew that.
As far as I could tell, I never had a coal mine run out on me, but that just means because I maybe didn't optimize the efficiency on it.
But they also didn't bring out. They don't bring you as much coal as a coal thumper, for instance.
No, but it does automatically gather it.
It does automatically gather it. Yes. So that was something I found completely by mistake, and it was because I built a coal thumper, my mouse hovered over it, and I was like, oh, it's highlighted the coal. Oh god, okay, I need to do something. But it was I think I want to ask you about laws and laws you put into practice in any act. How because it's a slippery slope.
So this is interesting.
And how bad did it get for you? Because I think basically the game puts you in these sort of stressful situations where it's like, look, you don't have enough workers, you need to be gathering coal. Do you want to enforce a law where the children now have to work in factories and stuff like that? And obviously, if the games go well for you, you go, no, I don't have to do that. I can keep everyone happy. But in desperate measures, you're like, yep, fuck it, yeah, and get the amputees to work as well. Just all of them, get them all to work.
Well, this is the thing I found interesting about the laws was so the 2 things I realised about the laws were at the start. Eventually the game will sort of prompt you. It will go, hey, you can now instigate a law if you want to, or an event will occur and it will go, the people would like you to pass this law. And the laws are sort of an ambiguous book of things you can do, because you're right, sometimes it's like child labour. You can now put children to work. And initially, that seems okay, because the law is children can work in safe jobs. For example, gathering the coal, picking up the coal, putting it in a hut. And you go, well, we're all going to muck in. Let's put the children in the cup.
And it makes people temporarily unhappy, but that is fine. You can build up that happiness again.
Yes, and if you sort of, you can go through the crisis management going, look, we just need children to do something to be happy and make it work. You can then also, later on, put children to work in any situation, because now things are so desperate, and now and it's sort of it points out the benefits of doing this thing. There is always, we've mentioned this before, there's a hope bar and a discontent bar, and they're not quite the exact opposite of each other. You can have high hope and high discontent at the same time, but these sort of reflect the mood of the people. And if your discontent gets too high and your hope gets too low, you are banished, which happened to me twice. So you have to be careful about signing the laws. But not all laws are detrimental. Some laws are actually pretty good. Some laws are going to help people. One of them that's good...
Pub is the best one.
You can open
pub
up
is the best one.
It can open up a fighting club. You can sign laws that are actually super inspiring to people. For example, you mentioned amputees. You have to sign a law that gives people amputees, but then you can also promise to give them prosthetics. And then you can also put obligations onto yourself that will raise hope, but now you have to manufacture prosthetics. Now you actually have to follow through on the thing you said you were going to do. And this This is quite interesting, because one of the things I learned was the laws are on a cooldown. You can only instigate laws every few days or so.
Yeah.
But you don't have to take every time you get the opportunity to take a law, you don't.
Oh yeah, you're not forced to do a law. Yeah. Oh, did you Were you like forcing kids to work in mines because you were like, well, I've got to do something?
No. I very quickly realised that I don't have to do something, and it was actually more the case that so there becomes a turning point in the game. I won't say what it is because if you haven't played it, it's a hell of a moment.
Oh, how are we gonna? We have to talk about.
No. There is an event that desperately affects the hope of your people, and I don't want to say what it
that.
is.
Oh, yeah, we don't need to talk about that. Because I wanted to talk about like the last 2 weeks of the campaign.
Oh no, we'll talk about the last 2 weeks right at the end.
That's incredible.
There is an event that affects the hope, and the thing is as well, because I played through it multiple times, I knew what that event was, and I deliberately avoided it for the longest time.
Yes, yeah, good.
So there's an event that happens at Plummets Hope, and then you have to choose between a way to inspire the people, and it's either faith or order.
Yeah.
Now, my first run through, I picked order, and you quickly learn that order basically means you are going to become a fascist despot. And faith basically means if you are not careful, you will become a religious fascist despot. And
But they're both the same, really. They're just labelled in different ways. But the order one seems more actively brutal. And because they basically just give you the same thing. So like one, if you do order, then you get these blaring megaphones that fire out propaganda. But if you do the religious one, then you get a similar item, but it just allows people to like pray. It's like these little religious beacons. But you sort of go, well, that's the same. They operate as the same function. It's just they've just framed it differently.
Sort of. I found so having done both paths, the religious side of it, you can be very, if you sort of know that the game's trying to play this trick on you. Because this is another thing about Frostpunk. Frostpunk has a very particular philosophical outlook on how humans behave in a crisis.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to me that I feel like if you're not careful, Frostpunk will trick you into being depressed about this. Frostpunk's pretty nihilist about, about how it sees humans in crisis. But if you are aware that the game is trying to play a trick on you, you can and credit to the developer, you can beat the game at its own trick. Because I took the faith religious path, and I deliberately did not take the extreme measures that turn up down that path.
No, you don't, because you don't have to.
You don't have to. The game nudges you. The game's like, for one thing, if you become a despot, there are laws in both paths that allow you to sign something to basically say you are an irremovable leader who cannot be questioned. And you can absolutely press that button. You will avoid being banished. Like, basically, you will finish the campaign. It's just now whether or not...
Will you be ruling over any alive people?
Well, yeah, will you be the last person alive is basically the question.
Yeah.
But I feel like Frostpunk wants... I feel like it wants to teach you that lesson. I feel like it wants to teach you the lesson that, slipping into totalitarianism is, in a crisis, it's very easy to do. Which, historically, sure, there's a lot of evidence to show that. In a crisis, you can lose control of your civilization. There's a particular thing... This is a slight spoiler for the ending. I don't feel like it's a story spoiler, because basically the ending of the game sort of reflects on everything that you did.
Yeah.
And I knew it did that. I found out by accident that it did that. So I deliberately didn't go too far with the laws. And the game went, you didn't cross the line. You managed to keep control without... I mean, did you manage to do that? Or did you find yourself in a bit of a despot scenario?
It wasn't a despot scenario necessarily. The moment I realised I was like, this is probably going too far, was in that first campaign, I went down the order route as well. And the worst it got was I had a propaganda ministry, and one of the guys shot himself.
Wow.
One of the guys killed himself because he was like, I know we're doing wrong. And I was like, all right, let's dial it back. Let's dial that particular branch back. And then once I completed it, I then went back and just did the whole thing differently. Didn't go down either route really.
Okay.
I was just determined to do that first campaign without any deaths at all. And
that's
the game just
insane. Surely that's not possible.
Oh, it's very possible. Yeah, it's very possible.
No, come on. People die of old age. People just pass on, don't they?
No, they don't. No, so you've got to. What was I going to say? There's one bit you've got to like save scum over. It's almost like a glitch in the game.
Okay.
If you get your engineers to work extra shift, like a 24-hour shift,
Which is a very unpopular move, but is also a great example in the Book of Laws where it's like, sign that one as soon as you can because you will need it.
100%. Well, the first one is extended shift, which extends shifts by 2 hours, and you go, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
But the 24-hour law, the first time anyone works 24-hour shift, someone will die on the shift every single time.
Really?
And so what you got to do? So what you got to do is you've got to save scum for like 12 hours. And just keep saving every 5 minutes, just so the game doesn't give an because every time you load the game up, they're not going to kill someone instantly,
right? So
they give you a few minutes leeway. So like you just so once you've gotten through that, it is very easy to keep everyone alive. It's really, really easy because I mean, it takes a lot of.
But like, are you accepting the sick people when they arrive at your door? Because one of the
I accepted every single person.
You accepted every single. So again, something that happens in this game is that refugees sort of turn up at your door and say, "Allow us entry," and you can make decisions about, do you let the healthy ones in? Do you let everyone in? Do you turn everyone away? And of course, this is an interesting problem because if you're like me, every time someone knocks on your door, you're going, I could build another factory if I get another group of people. I could build another resource post.
Sometimes if you can get so on top of the game that you actively look forward to an influx of people.
Yes, that's true.
But there's one of the campaign missions is purely about refugees, and it's hundreds of increasingly ill people arriving. And by the end, they're already, and that's a really hard one. But sometimes in the game you just lose control. You just reach a point of no return, and you're just hearing that constant death knell bell ringing sound effect every couple of seconds because it's just hundreds of people are dying, and you just sort of go, I'm behind. There's nothing I can do. But that first campaign is very doable without any deaths. Very doable.
I find that interesting. I mean, you've admitted that you had to save scum to get around it, so I think the philosophy again. I think the game design.
Well, to get rid of that's to avoid one specific death.
Sure,
it's one specific. But it feels like a glitch. It feels like a glitch that's in the game that you cannot because after that. Do a 24-hour shift, almost no one will ever die on shift. It's just the first time you do it, every time you sort of go, well, that's a glitch then.
No, I think that's intent. I think what Frostpunk has in it that again is something that's really special about it. We talked about it in the Book of Laws. That is a moral choice system. Like, they've put a moral choice system into the game, and they didn't tell you which was a good decision, which was a bad decision. They've mixed in practical things with moral things.
Well, so they let you know in advance, this will make people slightly unhappy.
Oh, yeah.
But because, for instance, there's one law which is like, you can have twice as many people in a medical tent. You have twice as many patients. It means some people will sleep on the floor.
Yeah.
There is barely any rise in discontent, but it will cure twice as many people. And you go, 100% that one.
Oh, I avoided that one because I thought it was going to lead to more deaths. I mean,
no.
Did you ever press the triage button? That is an amazing moment.
What was the triage one? Is that the...
So triage is you will cure half your patients immediately, and you will kill a quarter of them immediately.
Yeah, absolutely not that. No, I never pressed that. I never sent kids.
I did that once, and it ruined my campaign. It was just like the discontent shot up in a way that was unsavable.
There are some where you sort of go, this cannot be good. Like, I never sent kids to work in every job. Never did that.
Did you use children?
You can get kids to help. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course.
See, my successful campaign, I didn't. My successful campaign, I built the children's home instead of putting children to work, and we still managed to do it.
The children's home is a good one. Is a good one. But the helping out with like engineers and stuff like that, I thought, actually, that's quite a nice. It's quite a nice job.
Yeah. The
so that's not too bad. There was some I never pressed. Never built the brothel. Because I thought that just doesn't seem worth it. I never added sawdust to food.
I did that. I think I did soup. You can pick a thin soup.
Always do soup. Always do soup. Soup's great. Soup's a fine one to do. I never did the body pit. I never did that one.
Oh no, did you do cemeteries as well? Did you do...
Well, not on the first campaign because nobody died.
Oh, lucky you! You didn't have to build a cemetery.
And then there are a few more I never did as well. There were some really dodgy looking ones where I was like, that doesn't seem okay. Like, there's got to be no benefit to doing that. The brothel one in particular.
Well, yeah, the brothel one I think is it keeps people content but slowly erodes hope, which I think
hope goes down. I found that quite funny. Yeah. But yeah, that it just some of the laws feel desperate and unnecessary. Definitely.
Did you ever pursue the religious path to the point where you got? It's essentially like religious hospitals.
Yes, the religious hospital's amazing.
The village hospital is fascinating because it basically says you need to build it because people want it because it gives them hope, but it is less efficient than a hospital.
Yeah, it takes twice as long, but I was like, do you know what? Just having people being treated means they won't die. And that is fine. It just keeps them out of the way. That was great because also I like. So we should talk about the finale.
Okay, yes. So this is the thing
because that is, I loved it so much because that helped that. The game is so immersive and it's so emotive as well, and it's just so like. I hate the use of the word epic. I hate it so much, but it really did feel incredible and just so atmospheric.
I think epic does apply to this because the scale of what you were doing is like it's not quite necessarily clear, but you might be among the last living humans on Earth.
Exactly.
So it does. You feel the responsibility of this might be an extinction moment for humanity.
Yeah, and I like the way the graphics work in this particular bit. What happens is, as we were saying, you send out your hunting parties every night who go and collect food. You send out your explorers. And they find exciting stuff to bring back, or you can set up sort of supply posts where every day they can bring back more coal and iron and stuff like that. Now, eventually you reach... There's dozens of these locations. It's really exciting. There's just so many.
Yeah.
And each of them's got their own little story to tell. But eventually, you reach this corner of the map where they realise we think there's an enormous storm coming. We think there is an absolutely enormous storm coming. And over the course of the coming weeks, every time you zoom out into this huge map of all the locations you previously visited, you can see the storm overtaking the map, and it freezes over the locations you've previously visited, and you go, we can't go there. And as a result, you have to eventually shut down your outposts one by one and go, right, these guys are going to come home, let's bring everyone. There's something really exciting, like getting everyone on the lifeboats into Titanic, just really exciting about just a rescue operation of just get everyone back in.
Yeah.
And over the course of that time as well, you're trying to hurriedly send out your explorers to just find all the last remaining outposts just to make sure we've got everything sorted. But during that time as well, you can see, you keep spotting on the map, there's this group of refugees spotted, this group of refugees spotted, shall we accompany them and help them in? And you're just helping hundreds of people come into your city, all the while trying to make it insulated enough so it's gonna be ready for the storm. And the game tells you, during the storm, no one's going to be able to work. Everyone's going to be indoors, so we've got to make sure we've got enough supplies. No one can go outside. And that just felt so... And the music just keeps ramping up. It was just so exciting, because as I said, I've only ever played these strategy games before where a scripted event will just be a one-off occasion, like the king is hosting a meal, a banquet, that sort of thing, like you get in Crusader Kings, or a big battle in Age of Empires. But the idea of there's an event happening in a few weeks and all your actions towards it, you can see it happening whilst it's taking place. I'd never encountered something like that in a game before. I just couldn't believe it, and I was just hunched over my PlayStation, just pouring buckets of sweat, unlike anyone else in that city, because it was just amazing. It was so amazing, and it felt really satisfying once it reached that stage of, I think we're ready. I think we're ready to just shut the city down and get everyone inside their homes, because you can see the temperature keep lowering as well, and it's got this quite nice little visual dynamic, a bit like when a character is freezing in a game and they've got little tendrils of frost around the outside. The temperature, the thermometer's sort of freezing over. It was just brilliant. It was so brilliant. I loved it. Did this have any effect on you?
So the thing about the storm is, I've already said I had to play this game 4 times to get to the end, and my first 2 runs were awful. So the first 2 times.
Why would they be good? Why would they be good? The game doesn't really hold your hand. It tells you everything you need to know.
Well,
but that fundamentally is that on its own isn't enough.
I'm not sure the game does tell you everything you need to know.
but isn't that a necessary part of the game? It cannot tell you everything. I mean, it gives you a bit of information, like, in a couple of days' time it's going to get a bit colder, that sort of thing.
But this is the thing: is it doesn't tell you that's what that means. It doesn't tell you to look for that. The thing. My main I'll sort of hold off a little bit on this because I want to talk about the storm in detail. But I do think there is a problem with this game about telling you how it works.
Okay.
But the thing about the storm was, eventually I got to the stage where I found out a storm was coming.
Yeah.
And I also got this sensation of, okay, this is the finale of the game.
Yeah.
It basically becomes very apparent when the storm is coming that actually, if you know it's coming, there are loads of things you can immediately stop caring about. There's lots of things, so you basically realise, okay, it's just about coal and food now. We had to care about steel and wood in order to get to the stage where we could get as much coal and food as possible. But now we're so done with steel and wood. Just get coal and food. And so everything now, you're piling every single resource into these things. And even though I knew it was coming, even though I knew the only things I had to care about were food and coal to survive the oncoming storm, it still was so close that it nearly wiped me out in the last chapter.
Really?
Even though I'm playing as optimally as I think I can with the resources I've got. Again, I'm not great at these games, but I'm really doing everything I can. And I agree with you. There are moments in the... because you have this center generator that basically decides how warm everywhere is going to be.
Yeah.
And you can set it to different levels and different ranges as you research more. And because I knew that the game ends in a massive storm on my fourth go, I was like, right, I've just got to prioritize heating the city. I cannot, I've got to immediately get through all the upgrade levels. I've got to immediately get all the power upgrades as quickly as possible because this is not going to be survivable. And there are times where in the final storm, I'm at the override switch. And if if you override the generator, it blows up, which is how my third run ended.
What? You blew it up?
I blew it up. I blew it up. I lost track of what was going on with the override. I became way too dependent on the override switch. So I'm and the override, the red bar is like at 80%, 85, 90. And I'm just basically having to play a game of clicking it, letting it drop 15%, clicking it, letting it rise 15%. It's the only way I can survive the storm. And I'm watching my coal go from tens of thousands to single thousands into the hundreds. And I'm going, we're so close. We're so close. We can do this. Managed to actually... And this is the thing. I've never, ever played a strategy game where I'm sat there looking at a single switch and I've got sweat on my brow going, I've got to get this right.
It is so... It's excellent, isn't it? And the nice thing is, the game allows you to just focus on that element because during that storm, there's nothing else you can do.
No.
I mean, sure, you can try and stop the hospitals and stuff like that, but your engineers are all gone home, you're not researching anything else, everyone is just at home, pubs are closed, it's all, everything is stopped. So all you are focusing on is just that coal element and the food. And that's why it felt... Because, I mean, if you play it as optimally as you can, which does involve a knowledge of how every event goes and what, every temperature drop and stuff like that, the amount of coal and food you can get is astonishing. I found when I did the second run through of the campaign, you can get these sort of huts where you leave all your surplus food or coal, and that, if you've got a bit of extra coal left over, because otherwise you reach a limit and your villagers can't get anything else. You can then get these huge hangars which you can fill with thousands of food and stuff like that.
I never got that. Oh, that'd have been good.
But it's like an upgraded version of the supply hut, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
But they cost a lot of steel and wood. They're really expensive to build, but they will hold thousands. I had probably about a dozen of those for each resource. So by the end, I had tens and tens of thousands of coal, tens and tens of thousands of food. And the whole city was just run by automatons. Because eventually I had an automaton running a factory. So that was making automatons every day, all day, every day. So it meant when the storm actually hit, all villagers were at home. They were either at home or in the hospital being cared for by automatons. And it almost actually felt quite boring, the storm, because I was just watching. No one was getting ill. No one was dying. And you just sort of watching it happen going, we couldn't run out of coal if I tried. I didn't have to touch the override switch once.
Surely you had that moment, though, where even if you got the generator running at the highest level, in the highest range,
would you
have
the
override
during
switch is on, people are still in freezing cold conditions, and you still...
They are, but did they all live in houses?
Yes, I did. I got up to houses. I did something that possibly wasn't necessarily a brilliant idea, but I basically started working on the principle of building neighborhoods where you can build an extension of the generator called a steam core. And then I would build neighborhoods around the steam core.
Good idea.
But it's also a brutal idea because sometimes I'm there going, oh shit, we're about to run out of coal.
So shut down that one.
So yes, I'm looking for the neighborhood that has workplaces rather than houses, and it's got maybe one house that I built there in a desperate moment, and I went, sorry, single house, it's costing me too much, I can't keep you. But the thing about that, and I think that's super admirable about that, and you mentioned it earlier, this is not a genre of video games that is good at storytelling. Strategy games are really genuinely quite bad at storytelling. In terms of when you think about the strategy games that have really good stories, so Warcraft, Starcraft are generally known for having pretty good storylines. the way they do it is cutscenes. It's cutscenes and talking heads, and it's a very disconnected way of doing story. It's not necessarily like bad exactly. Like I say, those two games are renowned for having quite entertaining, engaging stories. But this is a game that does the thing that video games should do, which is that you actually see the story affect the mechanics in a way that makes you feel more immersed and connected to what you are actually doing. This is a game in which the story... It's always this thing that stuck with me, is that a video game story is not the cutscenes in the script, it is the things that happen in the game. Yeah. So when the storm hits, okay, that's a scripted event, but the story is, I had to shut down a generator in a neighborhood to keep everyone else alive. And that's not something that obviously turns up for everybody. And that's not something that the game will necessarily recognize beyond a death count goes up and my ability to find people. But that's the story.
Yeah.
And it's a beautifully, like... The game is so bleak in terms of its presentation, and it's so bleak in terms of, like, your starting point is mankind has headed north to find warmth, which is the most depressingly stupid thing I've ever heard in my life. And it sells it, but it doesn't feel like... When you play a game like The Last of Us, where every moment of The Last of Us is scripted, that game is so scripted, it can't wait to push you down a path and surprise you with exactly the same thing every single time you play it. Yeah. And it works beautifully in that genre in the way that game works and so on. But Frostpunk is a game that doesn't need to make it... It doesn't need to put, like, a character crying on screen. You can feel the sadness. You can feel the bleakness because you're aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's...
It's remarkable how... it's... And I can't describe. I don't know if it's because the decisions you're making aren't just what you get in Age of Empires, where it's we built a stables today. It's like no, we built this fighting arena because people need to take out their anger and frustration every day or in the evening, and every night you can hear the bell ring as the fighting gets underway, and you're sort of like, "Fuck, it's horrible."
Yeah,
this town is horrible, but it feels really it's hopeful in a weird way.
I think it's a really excellent example of mechanics as storytelling. And I think the reason I really, really found it successful in that regard is because I can't think of another game in this genre that is as successful as mechanics and storytelling. And then when you see it happen in Frostpunk, you think, actually, this is obvious. This is something that this genre has always been able to do. It's always been able to... I think there is actually a moment in one of the Warcraft games where like a plague strikes and suddenly all of your units get converted to enemy units and you go, what the hell? But this game is telling a story that if you were to try and tell it as a film, you could probably make an effective film, but it wouldn't be the same story. It wouldn't be the story that you understood and that you got to follow on.
No, absolutely.
They're currently right now making a Last of Us television show, and I'm pretty sure the story of the Last of Us television show is going to be very similar to the game that I played.
Yeah, because, but it's they wouldn't have pretended anything. They wouldn't have pretended otherwise because it would be awful if they just sort of go, no, we in this one Joel doesn't do anything morally ambiguous. It's just he's just a good guy, and you go, what? That's not no.
But this is the thing. It's the thing is it's that distinction between. I think the thing that Frostpunk is really successful as is that it does literally throw script upon the screen. It does literally say something has happened, and it will do little clever emotional things. Sometimes a kid will.
Yeah, there's little things that this father wants to rush up the city to find his daughter.
Yeah,
and you sort of go, surely it's certain death if we send him, but you go, I know what's going to happen. Of course, I know the game is bleak, but it's not so bleak that if I let the father go out of the city, they're going to go, we found his frozen corpse a few weeks later. Of course he died, a fucking idiot.
Oh,
I
totally thought that could happen.
No, I just assumed, I was like, the game is so, like, obviously the game is emotional enough that this guy running out to find his daughter, of course they're going to be fine. So I sent him out. I was like, go and do it. Because and then sure enough, a few weeks later he comes back with his daughter. And they go, it's a miracle! And everyone's really happy.
That's if you can send him out with food. I've had that event happen to me and I didn't have the food to send him out. He just left and died. But this is the thing, is you also have the option, to stop him leaving the city.
Yeah.
But then I have that moment of sitting there going, he wants to leave. If I force him to stay, surely I've made... Like, there's a part of me that's like, no, come on. His life is his responsibility. This is what he wants to do. If I get in his way, I'm like, he won't be satisfied. He will become miserable. And it's not fair on me to do that to someone else. And this is the thing. Like, that's something that this genre has always had at its fingertips, is this ability to go, you are a responsible person in power, how do you treat your citizens? Because in Age of Empires, you tell someone to go chop wood, they'll chop wood for the rest of their lives. They don't care. They'll just do what you tell them immediately and forever. Whereas in this game, like, you'll send someone to go work down in a coal mine, and then a message will come up saying, the workers have asked if they can not go down the coal mine. They'd like to spend the day praying because of the oncoming storm that they think is going to wipe them out. And then you have to sit there going, do I, like, from the management perspective, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? We need coal. Go back down the mine. But another part of me is like, I mean, yeah, if you were in that situation, you probably would want to spend time with your family because you might be about to die.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was absolutely blown away and impressed by that. I think in terms of presentation, you're absolutely right. The presentation on this game is fantastic. They've done very, very well with what does not feel like a AAA game budget. There's no, like, there's a cutscene at the start with some voiceover. Outside of that, it's all music and script. There's no major production elements beyond that, and they do a very good job with a sort of minimalistic approach almost.
Yeah, it's just what feels like sort of hand-drawn images occasionally pop up.
Yeah,
where they go, "This boy's injured himself in the factory. Will you shut down the factory for a day?" And you're like, "Oh, fuck."
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah. Sometimes it's okay. Yes, you're right. It's unreasonable to keep you working in the factory. but the problem with Frostpunk,
here we go,
and it's an inherent flaw of the genre. It's the reason that I failed a lot of the time is it's just a game where you don't realise that something is or is not happening because there's so many things going on, and the game has, all of these games have this, like, internalised idea that either A, you have played this genre of game before and know exactly how to play it, or B, of course you'll figure out you need to do this. For example, collecting the coal. Collecting the coal is not something the game tells you have to, like, tells you this is how you do it. But then also it won't tell you things like the gathering posts, which are a thing that you can install, and anything in its radius, people will gather things and bring it back to the gathering post. But they don't, when you start the game, they don't say, oh, the first thing you should do is build a gathering post. It just says,
but that's a recommendation. Coal. You can do it without the gathering post, but if you look at, let's look at the buildings we create. We could create a hut, we can create tents. Tents allow people to sleep and give them warmth. And then you go, oh, the upgrade of that is a house, and the house provides even more warmth. It does tell you what a gathering post is.
It does, but only if you click on the menu, you click on the resource, you hover over gathering post, you read the description, and then you go, oh.
But by that point, you've got to look at the buildings that you want to have, right? I mean, the game could do with a tutorial, but then that would remove the whole element of, fuck, we've just been left in this crater, where do we even begin? And I think the game is for giving you a good, 2 days before you even need to turn the generator on?
It does, but, like, for example, I spent a very long, because I've played a genre game before, I assumed the thing I needed to do to gather coal was build something called, like, coal gatherer, or, like, coal mine, or thing.
Fair.
And I'm going, what? No? And then eventually I figure out, oh, there are resources scattered around that I can just click on and say pick up. Yeah. And then I'm going, oh, okay. So they click on and then they pick up.
To do it, yeah.
And then I do that for a while. And then eventually I find out about the gathering post. And I go, oh, okay. So we use the gathering post. So then when I'm on the second run, I'm going, okay, gathering posts are the most efficient places to capture the most resources. That's great. Coal thumper, okay. If I put a gathering post next to the coal thumper, then they'll be able to gather the coal from the coal thumper. Oh, hang on. The coal thumper has now reached its storage limit. But I've put a gathering post next to it with the full amount of people, the most people that can work on it. Turns out the coal thumper is more efficient than people picking up the coal. Yep. And that, again, is something that you will just never learn until it's happened, and now you're in a crisis, because now...
But isn't that a fundamental part of the game of dealing with stuff as it happens? Sure, you've got the scripted events, you've got the chaos of, we'll have to deal with this temperature drop as it happens, but also you are, like, you as the head of the city, are learning these things alongside the villagers, because you go, you as the leader of a city have presumably never built a city before.
Sure.
I think it does work almost sort of thematically. I mean, it could do a better job of explaining, but these are issues that, you're gonna, sure, it will lead to people, it probably leads to a few deaths.
Sure.
But this is a game where ultimately it was so hard. It was so hard to do this with 0 deaths in each of the campaigns.
I'm
as well.
surprised you bothered. I don't know why.
I just want. I don't know. I cared. I don't know why.
Is there a trophy? Is there an achievement you get for doing it?
No, not as far as I remember. And also, I don't care about I just don't care about PlayStation trophies.
Well,
at all.
that's the only thing I could think that would justify as to why you thought it was necessary to try and do it.
It's this weird perfectionist element of like, I want this to be as efficient as possible. I really want this to be a flawless. I don't know why. Maybe it was give me a sense of purpose during lockdown. I don't know. But I played it in January when I was allowed to go outdoors. But I think
that is the month to do it. I think in the bleakest winter is to sync up with this game in terms of just like it is cold, burn the coal.
Yeah. So these are things that can lead to deaths, but the game is quite forgiving with the number of deaths it takes for you to actually fail. We're talking like you need to have lost 80% of your city for you to fail, and that sounds like the game's being generous. It's very easy to reach.
It's very easy to do that, and it gives you a full blown warning. Like, it will go, you have X amount of days to raise hope or you are going to be kicked out.
Yeah, and that's when usually, for me, in failed campaign attempts, that's when it just snowballed for me, and I was like, I'm fucked. I'm absolutely fucked. The hospitals are just so full of dying people. I don't know what to do.
But I think, so, and then you're right to suggest that, like, you do sort of learn some things as you go. Like, obviously you learn everything about the game as you go along because that's how it works.
Yeah.
But then there are some things that it does that are amazingly bizarrely obtuse. Like, there's a system in the game where you have streets that connect buildings to other buildings.
Okay. I know the concept of this podcast is even if you like the game, you criticize the game, and then I've got to like defend it to the death.
Yeah.
I cannot defend the street building.
The street system
It
obtuse.
is astonishingly bad. It is astonishingly bad. And the way the villagers prioritise which bits of the street to build, because you cannot have a functioning building unless it has a street next to it that connects all the way to the generator or the rest of the city. You build like 2 bits of street, that's all you need. They'll only build one of them, and they'll go, we'll come back to the second batch in a few weeks. The game... Or you build one long bit of street, and they'll build like one bit of it, and then they'll walk for half a mile to build another bit of it, and you go, this is the least efficient way you could be doing this. And there was one period where I nearly had to restart the campaign over this. I was trying to send out the supply team out everywhere, to explore the locations.
Yeah.
But obviously, to build that hot air balloon element. Oh no, it wasn't. It was the people. It was when you send out like people to come out and bring coal back every few days. That thing that has to be built on like the side of a cliff, so it's built very far away from your city. I couldn't get them to build the street in any direction, to the point I eventually just had to demolish it and just start all over again. And it took days and days and days. The villagers just weren't building that road, and the game thought they had. It is so weird. It's a really, really bad system of a game I absolutely, almost unconditionally love. You've reminded me of something I had almost mentally blocked out.
Well, the thing about the street system, I totally understand why the street system exists. I think I understand why it exists, because the whole premise of the game is that it really wants you to build around the generator and then build outwards.
Yes.
But then it creates conflicts in that some of the resources are like right at the edge of where you're allowed to build.
Yes.
So it's going, okay, look, you can build further out, but there is a punishment. You have to connect it back to the straight. Otherwise,
and it will be freezing. It'll be freezing over there as well, yeah.
And the idea of the radial building system, if you could just build anywhere in this radial system, there's a system, the systems of the game I think are designed in such a way that you will regret building something where you did at a later point. There will be a perfect location that you gave to a workplace, and you're like, I need to put houses there, but if I delete the workplace, I'm going to lose this. And like, great, that's resource management, game design. That's exactly what you should do. And the game's basically going, oh no, the streets system is to stop you from doing that. Except, as you pointed out, they don't always build it efficiently. The thing I hated most about it was I would then build a building and go, okay, connect it with the street, and it would go, you don't have enough wood. And I'll go, okay, can I like tell you where the street's going to be? And then when you get the wood, you can build it. And they will go, no, that's impossible. We can't understand that concept. And I'm going, okay, fine. I will wait until the wood come out. Fast forward. Okay, we got wood now. Now you can build the street. And it's just, it seems arbitrary and it's annoying. It's not like a major blemish. It's just an annoying, bizarre system. The thing about this game is that I went in expecting it to be a huge, sprawling terrifying strategy game.
Yes.
And it wasn't. It was quite a small, like, this enclosed crater that you're in, that's the entire game, basically.
Yeah.
You can do these expeditions that go out, and they as you say, they bring in these text stories and things, and that's cool, but that's almost like a new resource you have to manage. You're in this crater for the whole game. And so I went, oh, I thought this game came out at full retail. I thought this game was a full AAA release. I go look it up. No, it came out 25 quid. And when I found out that it was originally released at that lower price bracket, I was like, okay, I've got to readjust, because obviously that's the developer's saying by putting it at that price point, okay, it's not a huge game. It is the game that I've made, and I've set it at the right point. And then I start to realize as I'm playing it, I'm like, actually, I thought this was a full retail price game. And when I thought it was a full retail price game, I was like, this is good, but I imagine it's going to run out of content. When I found out it's 25 quid, I'm like, oh, actually, I've now realized this is one of the best £25 games that exists. This is
but it's a weird one how we judge games based on that, which is absolutely sort of fair enough. It's fair enough that, like, I, for instance, have always disagreed with, like, the Hitman titles coming out at 70 quid, and I'm like, I know they're like, but you can replay it and kill the enemy with this weapon instead. I'm like, no. One playthrough should be enough with a game like that. One, genuinely, doing all the campaign missions should be enough. And you go, in which case, you can do the game in 2 hours. That's not £70. Whereas, like, I permanently feel that, like, the Nobel Prize should be given to the guy who made Stardew Valley, considering he made every single element and composed the music and animated every pixel. I'm like, that makes the game go up in my estimation. More so than if it had been built by a team of 100 people. And I know that's not really logically how things should work. We should all present games with the same level of interest and respect if there's something we're interested in and respect.
I think it's more this idea that when I found out that it didn't release at that full £50 price point, my understanding of the scale the developer had set themselves changed. I came to realize that this game being a game that you can beat in 5 hours is not an accident, it is design. It is deliberately 5 hours long if you know what you're doing. And I love it for that. I absolutely love it for being the exact correct length that I can sit down of an evening and go, I'm doing Frostpunk tonight. I'm going to sit down and play Frostpunk and get as far as I can in 5 hours and see what I can do. That is such a satisfying way to play a video game. I love a video game that you can beat in an evening and it feels like you did the whole... Like, it obviously comparing it to like a film.
Yeah.
But in a way, it's sort of like... I was so glad this game... It does have an endless mode. You can click an endless mode and play it.
It does. I had no interest in engaging with that. And also, it does have a bunch of different campaigns, but they're all variations on a theme. You know, there's one where it's like... It's a bit like the bus in Speed. It's like, oh, the whole concept of this game is you've got these 4 greenhouses that need to be kept at a certain temperature for 2 weeks. That's kind of what the whole thing is. I get it. And I loved that first campaign, A New Home or whatever it was, so much that I was like, I would happily just play more Frostpunk. I cannot wait for the sequel. But yeah, as someone who's trying to finish 101 games in a year, I also love a
quick one,
when I can. But this was a game where once I finished that first campaign, I was like, no, I'm not counting that as completed. Let's do all the campaigns, because I was like, I want to see more of this. But yeah, it was. I just loved, and again, it was so. It interested me to zero extent when I first read the reviews when it first came out. I glossed over the reviews. I was like, this isn't going to be for me. And I'm so glad I played it, because it's and you know, it hasn't changed my outlook on strategy. It hasn't made me suddenly fling myself headfirst back into strategy games and go, oh my god, I need to play this game or whatever. You know, but because it is its own thing. It's you know, there's not like, oh, if you like Frostpunk, you might enjoy. But you know, if you enjoyed it, then you're more likely to enjoy survival games, or maybe Crusader Kings, one that has those little scripted events. I don't know, but I can't really compare it to many other things.
Well, you know how earlier we started off with Observation? We talked about Observation being... the thing I loved about Observation was I think I beat it in 2 sittings, and I did it lights off, headphones on, very atmospheric, very dark. Obviously, completely different genre, completely different other side of the games. But Steampunk... Frostpunk.
Sacrilege.
Frostpunk and Observation have that same thing to me, in that they're in that sort of the best kind of game you can beat in a sitting. The best kind of game where you sort of sit down and you lock into it and you immerse, and then you finish it and you stand up and you walk away and you're done with it. Yeah. And I kind of love it for that, because I feel like way too many games are... If you were trying to make this game to a AAA budget and you turned out with a 5-hour campaign, the publisher's going to come back and go, no, you're making this a 50-hour game. You are in the strategy genre. The point of the strategy genre is that you never, ever stop playing it.
Well, maybe the risk is that's what's going to happen with Frostpunk 2. You know,
I
it might
really
have a bigger
hope they
budget
don't.
behind it. I really hope not. Because also, I don't know what the campaign could be that's exciting as a small bunch of villagers have arrived in this new place. But I like that as a genre. I like that as a genre of just, non-AAA games that do take 5 hours. The Forgotten City was one I played a couple of weeks ago. I, again, would never have even heard of it if it had come out a couple of years ago. But a game that I did play in about 2 sittings, because I was like, and both times it was like, right, let's sit down for 3 hours at a time and just focus on this, because there's a lot of stuff to remember and a lot of stuff to engage with, but not so much that you sort of go, oh, this would stand the test of time. This would be interesting over 25 hours. It was just fun over 5,
Yeah, no, and this is the thing. So this podcast has had a few games that have managed to get the title of best video game I've never played. But the two that have stood out to me is like the two that are sort of fighting at the top for the actual title right now are Return of the Obra Dinn.
Great, okay, I can't fault that.
I love Return of the Obra Dinn. And again, Return of the Obra Dinn, kind of a game you can beat in about 5 or 6 hours. And if you know what you're doing, the problem with Return of the Obra Dinn is if you know what you're doing, the game is solved.
You shouldn't be playing. Yeah.
And the other one was a game called Wonder Song, which I absolutely loved. And that game was about 10 hours. It's a beautiful, lovely video game. It's sort of... I really liked it because I thought it was very emotive in a way that I didn't expect, and very cheery and funny.
I've never heard of it.
It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful game.
Check it out.
Go in with sort of middle-low expectations and have them be blown away, because it's definitely the way to go in. Because I went in going, this looks cute and I'll beat it in 3 hours, and then by the end I was like, I love this game. But so this game is now. I'm going to be honest with you. This game is now in this territory. So I think, I've been as critical as I can be, and the best I could do was the street thing's a bit weird, and I wish it told me how to play it better. And I think the truth is, I'm going to say it. Frostpunk is one of the best video games I've never played. It absolutely...
Yes!
It couldn't have had more going against it going in. It's not in a genre I like. It's not in a I'm not particularly fond of like...
And it's coming from someone who doesn't like the genre either.
Yeah,
but it's like, just give us a go.
And it's like I wasn't going in and going like, oh, what an intriguing premise. Like, it's a pretty cool premise, but it's not like it was in my particular tastes and fancies. It didn't grab a part of my brain that I was like, ooh, where's this going? So I went in with the expectation of someone going like, okay, I'll tolerate this. And by the end, I'm going, yeah, I like this. I really like this, actually. And even after this conversation, when we're talking about someone like, no, actually, I don't think I've ever played a game that's been that effective in that moment. So you've got it. You've absolutely knocked it out of the park. You did exactly what you should have done by destroying any hope of like the expectations I had for it beforehand. By like... picking something I never thought I was going to like, and I absolutely love it. So thank you so much for recommending this game and bringing it on, Glenn. It's been an absolute treat.
Oh, Lewis, it's been a delight. Thank you so much for having me.
Not at all. I mean, I'm assuming now you're going to go off and stream more video games.
In a couple of minutes, in about 7 minutes' time.
Where can people find you streaming video games?
They can find me on Twitch. My username is just Glenn Moore, and you can find me on there. The schedule varies because now that lockdown is pretty much over and gigs and the like are back, I'm sort of juggling on there. Usually it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 3 p.m. UK time, and then Friday nights from 8 p.m. where I play horror games. But usually on a stream we'll play 4 video games for about 45 minutes at a time and just try and race for as many as we can. So I'm trying to finish 3 games today out of 4 I'm playing.
Very quickly, which 3 games are you playing today?
Well, it's 4 games. So I'm starting with Stardew Valley just because that's going to take another month or so.
Sure.
Then I'm trying to finish Concrete Genie, which I'm not enjoying. The Forest, which I'm kind of enjoying. And Sexy Brutale, which I've really been enjoying. And I think I can finish those latter 3. And then Deathloop comes out. So that's what the rest of the week streams will just be. Deathloop.
You fantastically managed to pick 4 games I have played none of, so I hope they're all good. I hope you have a good time.
Do you know what? It's because I've run out of all the famous games.
Well, best of luck with them. I hope you managed to get your game sorted.
Much.
And thank you very much for coming on. Cheers.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That was Glenn Moore. Huge thanks to Glenn for coming on to the show. I just reached out to him to see if he'd be interested in doing it, and he was excellent at getting back to me. Very polite, very lovely. Wonderful guest. I'm so happy he agreed to do it. He introduced me to one of the best video games I've never played. An absolute delight, an absolute treat. I really hope you've enjoyed listening to it. I think Glenn and I had a lovely chat there, and I think it was really nice. I was so worried he was going to recommend a game to me that I didn't like. And then this man who I've invited on out of the blue, who I don't really know outside of this podcast, I was going to have to just basically break him down and go, oh no, the game you like's rubbish. I was so worried that it was just going to be me inviting somebody on to tell them I didn't like their taste and then sending them on their way. But fortunately, it wasn't that. It was a lovely video game. It's the kind of thing that made me really glad that I've started doing this show, because it was exactly the kind of thing I'm looking for. It's something I would never have picked up by myself. It's something I never would have sought out and tried to play. And then after I played it, I had my expectations completely blown out of the way, and I really, really loved it. So a huge thanks to Glenn. You can, of course, as has been mentioned, you can go and stream Glenn's stuff on Twitch. Definitely go look him up. If you Google Glenn Moore Twitch, you'll definitely find it. And of course, keep an eye out for him on things like Mock the Week. I think he's definitely been recording more stuff for television, so hopefully we'll see him on our screens again in the future. If you like this podcast, and hopefully you do because you're right here at the end, please drop it a review on iTunes, on Google Podcasts, on Spotify. I don't know if you can review on Google Podcasts or Spotify, but I'm sure you can put a nice thumb up somewhere in the world for this podcast. You can subscribe to the show if you've just joined the show and you've never listened to it before. Please do subscribe to it. We're available on all of the major podcast platforms. If you go to pod.link/bestgame, you can find a link to all of the ways that you can subscribe to this podcast. And hopefully, you'll have fun listening to some of the other episodes. Definitely go back. As was mentioned, I've done an episode on Observation. That's a really fascinating listen, particularly because I talked to somebody who doesn't necessarily like the game as much as Glenn and I did. So if you want to hear someone be more critical of that game, please do go seek out that episode. Apart from that, Any Suggestions Doctor, the improvised Doctor Who show that I do, is currently on tour. Go to anysuggestionsimprov.co.uk for tour dates and find out where you can come and see that show. Otherwise, blimey, these outros are getting long. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening. Stay safe.